Hey, welcome back to another video. I am Ramona, and we are continuing the what is the scariest experiences you've had in your life that could only be contributed to the paranormal, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing there. First story. I was around 9 or 10 at the time the story happened. My best friend and I had been riding our bikes, just being kids and screwing off. We lived in one of those older towns that are filled with older homes and kind of compacted, so the roads turned to dirt and fields pretty quickly. We were maybe 5 or 6 blocks from my house when we found a new road to explore, and we followed it down. We passed a church, took an L-turn, and were basically out of town in the country in a few feet. We could see an old bridge a ways down, so we took off to check it out. The ride from the turn of the bridge was a little less than half a mile. As we get closer and closer to the bridge, I start to notice something is wrong with it. It's an old metal and concrete bridge, and the metal's been painted red, but it's peeling pretty badly, and the whole thing is leaning heavily to the left. There are 2 big piles of rock blocking each side of the bridge, and we stop our bikes at the first one. It's really quiet, and I immediately want to leave this place, hated being there from the start. My friend calls me a chicken and gets off her bike and climbs the first rock pile. I refuse to leave my bike, even when she spots an armadillo and chases it, barking. As she hits the rock pile on the other side of the bridge, it's like she suddenly senses what I do. She slowly turns and is pale as fuck, saying that we need to leave. I don't argue, just wait for her to get back, because I'm not leaving her, and we take off. The whole ride to the bridge is easy. Our wheels glide like they were on pavement, not gravel. The ride back, though, is like trying to pedal through thick mud. We were both standing up on the pedals harder, and it feels like we were just creeping along. We stop about 100 feet away to catch our breath and look back, and there's a huge light, like a mini sun, hanging over the bridge. I'm freaking out. I looked at my friend to see if, as you do in this sort of shit way, and she looks back terrified and whimpers, "Go, go, go." Neither of us waits. We jump back on our pedals and pedal for all we're worth. We make it almost back to the turn, and this section of the road is lined with trees for a good bit, and we can see something black flashing between the trees right behind us. We hear a vehicle, think adults, so we're safe. At least as safe as enough to stop for air. We stop, and we see this truck pulling down a drive and onto the road. About a second later, we forget about the truck. There is now a red rectangle of light, like a tail light gliding about 7 feet off the road, left to right between the trees on either side of the road. We were both watching the shit as the truck pulls up in front of it and stops, and I thought maybe the people in the truck seen it. They probably didn't, because after waiting a good minute for our dumbasses to move out of the road, they honked at us. That honk was all we needed to get our asses back to pedaling home. We never really went exploring too much after that, and we spent the rest of the day in the house. I was telling this story later, in my late teens, early 20s, and one of the people in the group was familiar with that road. They had lived on the road not far from the bridge, and weird things would happen in their house. They explained to me that the bridge leads to a drunkard's house. One night this guy is heading home, completely sloshed, and misses the bridge, hitting the edge and flying into the overfull creek below. They search for a few weeks and evidently recover his truck, but he's never found. It's one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. I know what night terrors are, and I know the science and idea behind them. Basically, your mind and body is at a midway point between waking and sleeping. Your body wants to stay still to minimize you moving too much during sleep, but your mind is awake enough for your eyes to open and to focus on things. Since your body doesn't really respond to your brain, and your brain can't get it to move or wake up, it apparently starts scanning the room for any visible dangers, and it goes into overdrive, trying to identify anything and everything. The result is that your mind apparently flips out and conjures up whatever you think might be a danger. Hints, abductions, succubi, monsters, and such. Well, one night when I was 26, I was sleeping with the laptop on and a movie was playing. Usually I'm a heavy sleeper and deep dreamer. Not lucid usually, but just deep in there. I remember waking up to the glow of the laptop screen with nothing on. For reference, I also was raised up pretty Catholic. Lapsed now, not a big mass attender, but still a believer. Demons and Satan are real shit to us, and hell is not a joke. I remember being 7 and thinking that I was in real danger of going to hell. The idea of being tortured for eternity is terrifying to me. Anyway, I wake up and I can't move. All I can remember is a shadowy figure with horns standing over me and just glaring with this look of intense, soul-devouring hatred. This thing hated me with just darkness that I knew I would die in my bed if it let me. There's not a real description I can give, other than it was a human-ish figure, my bed obscured its lower half, without a shirt and vaguely bull-type horns, the kind that curl forward, not the legend kind. Its eyes were human, but not a particular color, just glaring at me like I was a piece of shit. The face and other details were covered by the fact that it was dark and I was standing in the shadowy area where the light of the laptop actually meets darkness. It seemed like several minutes, but it may have just been a few seconds. It took literally everything I had. I mean, just minutes of me thinking that what this one thing could do. But after struggling with the mental effort, I made myself lift my arm and do the sign of the cross. I must have crossed myself dozens of times while looking at the thing in my bed. In my mind, I prayed to Jesus to save me, saying the Lord's Prayer and Hail Marys, and just general, oh, help me, oh God, please help me. Finally, I sort of woke up. My eyes were open, I knew, but I felt there was just a sort of opening them again. Maybe I blinked or whatever, but I sat up and thought long and hard about what happened. Part of me to this day thinks that it was a night terror, and I believe it. But other part of me thinks, what if? Did I really get saved that night? Oh my God, I get stuff like this all the time. I don't see anything, but I get that feeling, and I feel frozen like sleep paralysis. I fight to do the sign of the cross, and normally I do, and wake up. It's terrifying. I like to think they're just dreams, but as someone like you, a believer who is a shitty Catholic and doesn't go to Mass, there's always a what if there. I also feel like there are terrible parts of it, and I simply don't remember when I wake up, too. I've had a few, some which I posted here. Here's one I don't think I have. I can elaborate if more info is needed, though. Sorry it's long. I went on holiday to Wales in 2012 with 7 friends. 5 of my friends went to this club. It was really expensive to get in, and being a poor student, me and 2 others decided to go to the beach instead. Our apartments faced the beach, and we had steps going down to our apartment, but we could also get to there from the back, so walking down an alleyway with a sensor light that lit up when you walked down it. We get to this alley and started freaking out and feeling scared to the point of almost crying. We walked down to the alley onto the beach. No one seems to be around. We walk down the beach, seeing no one, and I still feel a bit freaked out. I look up after walking for a few seconds and see this black opaque figure in the alley that we had just walked down with its arms stuck to its sides, out to its sides. I'm freaked out, but I try to keep my cool. It looks as though it's about 7 feet tall, and we're away from it, so it could be taller, closer up. I go, what the fuck is that? And run along to the beach to the left, into the dock where the street lamps, because I'm that terrified. My friends follow, and my skeptical friends ask what I'm doing, thinking I must be mad. Before I can speak, my other friend says, did you not see that black figure? Skeptical friend, who started running a couple of seconds after me and looked up the alley, says he did not see anything in the alley after we told him what we saw, and tries to come up with answers. For example, that it was an ill person, which is why they looked so weird. Obviously, we don't know, but my other friend and I saw it and were freaked out. It was freakishly tall, seemed sinister, and had a black opaque look to it. We saw no one and heard no one walking down the alley. I go back to my apartment. 8 of us were sharing 2 apartments, and make them wait there until 2 a.m. until the others come back. For the next couple of days, I feel freaked out, sleeping in the room I share with another friend, and feel like something is watching me from the corner, although it could have just been because I was freaked out by that experience. 2 days later, whoops, let's fix that. We were on the beach and I needed the loo. I'm very poo shy. So take all 3 of our keys to the apartment and checked him. No one needs to go in, saying I'll be 5 minutes. I go in with the keys in a pocket and go to the loo. I had been playing a trick on a friend with a toilet light switch. Was in the hallway outside the loo and had been turning it off and on when she was in there. Yes, I was immature. I was on the toilet and suddenly all the lights went off, both in the loo and in the hallway. I could see through the crack under the door that the hallway light was off. I heard laughter and footsteps and assumed they had left a key and my friends were playing a prank on me. I still felt very afraid, and my phone went off, and I saw I had texts from my friends begging me to let them in. I washed my hands and opened the door, terrified but still convinced this was a prank. I went to the hallway and all the lights were off. I went into the living room where the main door was and saw all of my friends there outside waiting for me, looking puzzled. And then I asked later why they said that they should felt that they should come back. I checked my pockets and I had all 3 keys. I was asking the neighbors when they found out that they had not had a power cut. The light switch next to the bathroom had also been switched down, so it seemed as though this entity had been watching me play this prank on my friend and had copied it. I saw the black figure again down a different hallway or alleyway near some caves on the beach. We went on a ghost walk, and they were told about a mayor who had hanged himself in the area. Me and my friend who had seen the figure just stared at each other at this point, and the ghost walk leader said, "Wow, have you seen it?" Although it could have been her trying to make the ghost walk scarier, and this figure didn't really look hanged, if that makes sense. We got back from the ghost walk to find out that our friends had started a food fight between apartments. They ran onto the beach, but some went around the front and some went around the back and down the alleyway where I had first seen the figure. I ran behind them, but hadn't had my shoes on, so I was behind them, and I saw the figure ahead of me. But it wasn't in the alleyway as I had first seen it, the second one. It's hard to describe. Perhaps I can find pictures of the surroundings. It was a different angle and on the side road instead of down the first alleyway, which would have been to the right. I stopped and ran back to the apartment. The next day, I made our friend drive some of us down these roads where the alleys and side roads were, and there was no statues or anything that looked like this figure. On the last day of the holiday, we went to the other apartment our friends were in, which wasn't where I had had my occurrences, but it was next to the alley where I saw the figure. And the kettle was unplugged for a phone charger to go in, and was taken off the kettle stand that kettles used to boil. It boiled by itself, whilst not plugged in or the stand. Very creepy. I have more stories. Sorry for the length. Happy to elaborate if I have rushed writing this and haven't written it too well. And I do apologize for the dogs barking in the back. They're little assholes, but they're mine and I love them. I grew up in a haunted house, so spooky things happened all the time. And the absolute scariest thing that ever happened unfortunately happened about once a week. If you were sitting in our living room, you could see straight down our hallway to my bedroom door. It was pretty dark at the end of the hallway, but you could usually make out my doorway and the doors on either side of the pictures and things hanging on the wall. When the dark came in, however, it was like someone dropped a black curtain over the end of the hall. You could still see about halfway down the hall, but beyond that you might be looking into a black hole. When the dark came, it was always accompanied by this intense, uncomfortable feeling of being watched. Our family's 3 dogs would stare down the hallway and growl, and occasionally one of them would get brave enough to walk a little way down the hallway. But they always came back slowly out like they were afraid to turn their backs to the dark. After a little while, usually a few minutes to half an hour, the darkness would suddenly disappear and you could see it again. Sometimes, however, it would linger all night, and since nobody wanted to walk through the dark to get to the bedrooms, my whole family would be stuck in the living room at night. The first times it happened, we did turn on the hallway light to see what was down there, but as soon as we turned it off, the black came back. The dark came pretty frequently, once a week or so. It was rare that the dark lingered more than a few minutes. It was easier just to wait 5 minutes before going down the hall than it was to muster the courage to charge headlong to be the first into the dark. We so got stuck in the living room all night, maybe 2 or 3 times. And it wasn't like we were huddled there in fear. We were just all sort of passed out in front of the TV, waiting for the dark to lift. Probably we could have turned on the light and ran for our rooms, but as an 11-year-old girl, I certainly wasn't brave enough to try. As for anyone wondering why we didn't just move, well, it was our home. Moving is difficult and expensive, and we honestly didn't think it was worth it. Understand, weird stuff happened every day. It was most likely little things that were easy to ignore. The really scary stuff were rare and not enough to send us packing. I was at a visitation a few years ago. I was in line at the casket. It was very crowded and the line was long. All of a sudden, I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end and I got goosebumps. When I looked up, there was this woman sitting on a bench across the room from me. She was staring at me and had a very stern look on her face. Her brown hair looked as if she had slept on it and hadn't brushed it. She was very pale. I stared back at her for about 45 seconds to a minute. She never blinked. People kept walking in front of her, but once they moved, I could see that she was not taking her eyes off of me. It made me very uneasy. I remember my heart rate picking up. At some point, someone near me in line turned to talk to me. I took my eyes off of her to respond. It was a very short conversation, no more than 30 seconds. When I looked back where she was sitting, she was gone. The uneasy feeling stayed with me until I left the funeral home. I scanned the area looking for her and never saw her again. I don't know if it was paranormal, but it definitely freaked me out. That's understandable. That's kind of a weird thing. I can imagine a funeral home being very haunted, though. Having a lot of energy, and not all of it can be good, right? Not all of it can be peaceful. I was once laying in my bed after a long day, but I wasn't really tired enough to fall asleep. After a long day in a noisy environment, I found it really relaxing to just sit back with my eyes closed and listen to all the normal sounds of the house. It was almost like meditation. After 10 minutes of this or so, I was feeling the normal tension and stress bleeding off, and I realized I can sense something more going on. You know how when someone is in the room with you, your brain picks up on all the little things, like the sound of breathing or clothes shifting, and lets you know? I realized that there were three people standing around me, and they were having a clear conversation about someone, which I took to be me. The voices didn't seem hostile or angry, but I became convinced they were only to have the whole experience, and when I looked around to see they were not there. I checked all around the house and couldn't find a cause for what I had heard, but at the rest of the night I would have these moments where someone was watching me. That only got more intense the closer to sleep I got. I'm not even sure how I got to sleep that night. When I was a kid, I was sitting on my bed, looking out the window, watching the cars go by. I saw the reflection of what looked like a nun standing by my door. When I looked to see, there was nothing, and when I looked back in the window, it was gone. A lot of weird stuff happened in that house. Toilets flushing, tops spinning on their own, toilets cleaning themselves, and once a balloon went through my entire house to stay away from my baby sister's crib. Though the scariest would have been the time I was walking on a path at summer camp and felt something grab my ankle and drag me down the hill, despite there being nothing there. This happened one summer in Mexico in a small ranch village. I saw a girl get possessed once. She fainted and I caught her. We put her to bed and she started acting weird. She was crying and didn't want to open her eyes because she could see little demons or something. Her dad was murdered when she was young and kept insisting he wanted her to go with him and said that she could see him giving her his hand. Four grown-ass men struggled to keep her from rising up to grab this hand of her dad's. This went on for a few days, with people constantly by her side. The part that really tripped me the fuck out was when she started speaking English. She was adamant that her crush was going to come to work and she had to take good care of their baby. She didn't have any kids. I forgot how she calmed down, but how she ended up leaving her mother's house in the city, where she got better to the point where they felt that she was okay to go home to her grandmother's house. As soon as she goes in the room she was in, she burst out running and just kept going and going and going. She left for good, ended up coming to the U.S. with family and never really looked back. To this day, I don't know if she had a mental breakdown or what, but mental breakdowns don't teach you languages you don't speak or make you way stronger than you should be. When my father died in the hospital, my mom and I got home and looked at the family clock, one of those old French mechanical ones with weights. The clock had stopped exactly at the time of my father's passing. Now, nothing was wrong with the clock. The weights were up and everything should have been working. It just stopped ticking at exactly 8:35. I'm not generally a religious person. That was definitely odd, and it got me to thinking. Exactly 1 year later, on the anniversary of my father's death, the clock stopped again at 9:05. Same story this year. I feel as if the clock has some connection with my father. I was at my grandmother's house one time, just chilling on the couch, on my phone, laptop, or something. There was this stone plate on a stand at the top of my grandmother's TV that had a Bible verse on it. Be still and know that I am God. My grandmother was in the kitchen with a neighbor chatting about demons and some of their paranormal experiences they had had. Out of nowhere, the room got cold, and this rock plate falls out of its stand onto the carpet and breaks perfectly in half. I have a picture of the plate somewhere, and the stand it was in. No way it could have randomly fallen, as it was leaned back on the stand with just one of those fat TVs. Renting room in an old house. One night, footsteps approaching the bed. Audible swish of fabric. Sudden old attic smells. Something invisible ran to the set on the foot of my bed. It gradually lessened. Small giggle, maybe at the end. Not sure. Not me, but my sister was helping clean out my grandparents' attic when we were little kids. She found an old phone, disconnected, but being a kid who just picked up the phone, was saying hello, and hung it back up until she picked it up and said hello. Oh, hi, Grandma. Love you too. Bye. To this day, she says it was our great grandma on the phone. My dad used to work at the local library. Oftentimes, he would stay late working when no one was there but him. One day, he told me that he would hear loud crashes upstairs after close when only he was there, but then he would go look at it to see if something had fallen. There wasn't anything out of place. He told me about this, and we decided to go take pictures and ask questions while using a digital audio recorder. The following happened on two separate occasions. One night, while using the recorder, we asked the standard slew of questions and eventually headed home and listened back to the recording. At some point in the recording, a whisper could be heard saying, 1 and 1 is 2. I never knew what that meant, but it was just the two of us that were always assumed that it was the voice who was referring to. On another night, we were sitting in the main floor in some chairs using the recorder and asking questions. One of the questions I asked it was, do you like books? Right after I finished asking the question, I heard an unusually loud crash behind us. We were pretty unnerved and decided to just leave. This was a Saturday night. The library was closed on Sunday, so we went back to the library the next morning to see what had made the noise. A couple of rows of books behind had been sitting there. There was a book on the floor, lying open and face down. I picked the book up, and the first word on the page that was open was our last name. The book also had the word murder in the title. We were sufficiently freaked out. My dad and I have always been interested in paranormal. He's had some good stories as well. The library he worked used to be a train station. I'd always assumed that the strange thing that happened there might have been related to that. Very possible. Again, old buildings and all that stuff. My dad's side of the family has a lot of these stories. They're not bullshitters, so it's weird to hear the stories come from them. My aunt did a lot of Ouija board as a kid, and now she has spirits who follow her. She doesn't talk about it a lot, but she has told me some days she will leave the kitchen, come back, and pots and pans are stacked on the table. Or she will have a light on at night, and when she turns the light off before bed, she can see people walking around behind her in the reflection of the TV. As for myself, the only thing that ever really happened to me was I lived in an old house in downtown Kalamazoo in the student ghetto. I was home alone, and one night I turned my hallway light on and decided to take a shower. I thought I heard footsteps in my hallway. I figured I was being paranoid. I got out of the shower, and while I was lotioning or whatever before I left my bedroom, I texted my roommate, and she said that she hadn't been home. Texted my downstairs neighbor, because I lived in a duplex, and he said he had been an hour in bed for a couple of hours. Looked into the hallway, and the light was off. I was freaked out, but my own house was super old, and the electric was old as fuck as well. But when I went over, bitch, the light switch was down. Something turned it off. So I shat. I was sitting in my room listening to music when my mom came in panicking and said we had to leave the house and go pick up a family friend's son who had just flown into town from the airport. His mom couldn't make it because her stepson was being rushed to the ER for an attempted suicide. The song playing when my mom came in is called Funeral Bell by Phil Dill, and it's about fighting depression and suicidal thoughts. To this day, I'm just baffled. I was on a long bike ride with my friend to where he lived. Pedal bikes were Dutch. As we approached a massive forest next to the road, he mentioned that a lot of weird stuff went on in there. Multiple people had hung themselves. There were drug deals and other scary things. We were just going to go by suddenly when we heard a large hello coming from the trees. It scared us senseless, and we biked as hard as we could. It must have come at least 400 meters from where we were with the exact same voice. We heard a scream right next to us. Neither of us can explain what happened, and it still freaks me out. Once at a church camp, we were called to lay outside and think about God or whatever. I guess the point was to reflect and meditate on your faith, but I tried to talk to him. After about 10 minutes, I had an overwhelming feeling of joy, Ember bright light. I'm somehow no longer religious, but that certainly was an experience. I got a story of an old lady my friends and I thought were mentally unstable. We snuck into her house at 3 a.m. one night and got scared as crap by what we saw. I'll take the time to expand and type it out if anyone is interested. So my friends and I were pretty big troublemakers in high school. I had the reputation of it too. Some weekends we'd had random people hanging out with us because we were always getting into shenanigans. We also had a weird interest in paranormal stuff, breaking into old broken down houses to explore at night, driving to local spots known for orbs and lights. Just flat out loved the adrenaline of being scared. So one night we were all at a friend's house, there were 5 of us, and just hanging out. Then C, K, and B, abbreviated for privacy, started talking about a lady they had just done lawn service for. They were running this gig a couple of months, and this lady was actually one of their first customers. My friends had said earlier, all known for their fuck it attitude. No, were not afraid to straight shoot when they were thinking. So they started talking about how the previous visit to her, they were all taking a break from work to drink water and recoup. And C was like, straight up, do you guys ever feel like the lady's watching us from her house? They all agreed, surprised that they weren't the only one. They said it always felt like they could look at the window or blinds a few seconds late, and they were just like they were being watched. Anywho, they decided they didn't want to work for her anymore. Siva is the one who picked up the check from her, designated by the guys to be the one to have to talk to her. He said he went to the door, per usual, and the lady yelling very loudly, screaming at someone on the phone about her son. A few minutes later, she came to the door, acting very normal. She offered C to come back on Saturday to help, to move her stuff out to the basement. It's a one-man job, though, and since he always comes to the door, she offered it to him. Back to the now. They say they were supposed to go to her house on Friday. Right now, it's Saturday night, and they just skipped it because they got sketched out too much. They showed us the text she sent, a paragraph of how unprofessional it was to not show or tell her. And she sounded outraged. Okay, and we too were skeptical of their story and didn't believe she was some evil old lady, just old. They were exaggerating. Here's the kicker. They pull up a Google search of her name. It's a court document where basically this lady forcibly had her son admitted to a mental institution, and there was the primary person to put him there. Kind of sketchy, kind of fits her profile. So we dare them to all go with us. We're going to ding dong ditch this lady just to prove a point that she's not scary. Before you judge, we're 16. That's what we do to prove our balls. So fast forward 3 a.m., we're in my car headed to her house. Her house sits at the start of a street that goes uphill, with roads leading uphill to her house and ends at her very property line where the neighborhood starts. Her house has a garage in front and bay window that shows a long dining room. We park way down the hill street so that we don't have any noise to get people calling cops or anything. It's important that you trust me when I say there's absolutely no way anyone on the street heard or saw us coming. Sound, headlights, no way. We creep to the road together, planning on how we're going to run away and down the hill without biting asphalt. As we get close to where the woods and her property line starts to come into view, we come to the edge of the trees. It's 3:30 a.m. There's one light on the house, the dining room light. In the lit bay window, there is standing an old woman dressed in like white undergarments. Looks like I could have been in a movie. She's not moving, not turning her head, not looking around. This woman is literally blank-faced staring out the window into the dark at 3 a.m. in the morning. At this point, we're all kind of just taken aback, surprised as if we'd gotten caught for once. It probably was like 15 seconds, but it felt like more, like a minute or two. They were all there frozen, looking at the window to see if she was ever going to turn her head and look at us. Finally, C broke the silence and said, yeah, fuck this. And we all hauled ass back to my car and jetted. I know it seems like it's an old lady when I write it, but in person, having heard nothing but notions of evil from my friends, first time I come to this lady's house is at 3 a.m. in the morning. She's standing there looking in the darkness. We never knocked on her door. Well, that was a pretty interesting little creepy story there. Who knows? Maybe she's just a creepy old lady, or maybe she just couldn't sleep, or maybe she was putting hex on me. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, do those things, do none of those things, do one of those things. I don't care which one you do. Just do one of them. Anyway, thank you for listening, and go check out another video if you'd like. And until next time, I'll talk to you later.